Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. And as usual, by the way, it's an aptly named podcast. Don't you think so, Bill Bender?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. Absolutely, Tim.
Hey, man, whenever I feel like getting bent, I always bring on Bill Bender. And we're gonna go off on a bender here in a minute, ladies and gentlemen, about football and about why some people are playing and some people are not playing, and some people are playing like they might be playing, but they're not playing yet, and all kinds of play on words there, Bill. But bottom line is, as we sit right now, the Big Ten is still not decided to return to what I call full football practice. When I tweeted about that over the weekend, somebody said, "Well, I'll stay just practicing. They're wearing helmets and those spider web, those spider pads and stuff." I go, "That's not real football. That's just kind of staying a little bit of a in tune until you're given the right to put on the real pads and start practicing real football." But Bill, as we sit right now, this is Bill Bender, ladies and gentlemen, from the Sporting News. You should know him. He's been on my podcast here a couple of times. But first of all, welcome in, Bill. And number two, are you surprised at this moment we still haven't gotten a definitive word, so to speak, from the Big Ten on what its plans are going forward?
A little bit. I think the Big Ten saga, and it has become that since August.
Yeah.
I mean, every day there's another twist to it. It's played out. Tim, this is one thing, and I know you've been around the conference a lot longer than I have. I've never seen a feud play out this publicly between administrators, between the athletic directors, the school presidents, the coaches, and Kevin Warren being a first-time commissioner right in the thick of the entire mess. And then it kind of peaked last week. I mean, the president of the United States will continue to tweet about this. I mean, it's going to continue to happen as it goes along because we have no resolution as it pertains to any sort of final decision about when and where and how they're going to play football if they do.
Yeah. And plus, as we well know, the Big Ten region is chock full of swing states. So, of course, the president's going to weigh in. And as the old saying goes, with some of these presidents and chancellors and maybe even the commissioner of the Big Ten, I'm not sure how much weight that carries. May be more harmful than good, if you follow my drift, because I was texting with a fellow who has a vested interest in Big Ten, put his heart and soul into it for many years. Over the weekend, I said, it's almost a crime that, in fact, something hasn't happened here in terms of the Big Ten being cleared to play. When you look around the country and seeing high schools playing, you're seeing colleges playing. I think Central Arkansas has already played 2 games. I watched South Alabama at Southern Mississippi the other night. I mean, they're playing, but the Big Ten has kicked the can down the road, and that's the best term for it, because they are kicking the can. And, there were all these rumors that there was going to be a vote at the end of the week last week. Nobody I knew was saying that there was anything imminent in that regard, and as it turns out, there wasn't. There's no use entering into a conversation like that of refuting someone else's report. Now there's a report that there could be something by midweek this week. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. But you're right. When you have all these forces coming at you, telling you were wrong in what you did, sometimes you just kind of like build the fort a little higher, right? Like they did at the Alamo, and say, "Come get me." Bottom line is that's what we're seeing right now, I think, across Big Ten territory. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at the time when they made the decision, I think I wrote something to the effect of, I didn't have a problem with them canceling. I just had a problem with the timing. Yeah. And at that time, COVID numbers were different. We didn't know what was safe, what wasn't safe. And the SEC seemed to strike every note the right way with Greg Sankey. They released their schedule last. They're not playing for 2 more weeks, and there are still some COVID-related issues with some teams. And,
right.
And TCU SMU was canceled last week, so that it's not over. I just think the thing that I've been saying all along is as you look at plans for the future, is you're going to have to contend with COVID in October, November, December, January, February. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to contend with it. And you brought up the election part, and in the absence of getting too political, I would just say this is what I've been telling people all along. If you look at Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Minnesota, that's 74 electoral votes. if you look at if you believe the maps, a lot of those states are Democratic leans, or like you said, a swing state, and you can win an election with that.
Yeah.
Either one of those guys can win an election with that, and that's why you're seeing Joe Biden run ads with empty stadiums, and that's why you're seeing Donald Trump tweet about it. The Big Ten, who knew, Tim, that the Big Ten was going to be, they'll probably ask about it in a presidential debate. I wouldn't doubt it.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it either. It's a big deal. I mean, and like you said, I've been saying all along too, that the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 have yet to play a game. I mean, well, at least, I'm talking about the league game. I mean, and so that's what we're looking at. It's like, where does it go from here? Greg Sankey, I thought his approach was the best from the standpoint of, he said, the key word in all this is patience. And then I was texting with a buddy of mine who has a good buddy on one of the coaching staffs in the ACC. This was over the weekend, and I was kind of trying to get a hold of that guy, and he texted to my buddy. He goes, "Well, I can't really talk right now. We're in game week," And I said, "What's game week?" So here's the deal, Bill. I mean, like, you cover the national scene, and that's why I love having you on here. Is October 10, is October 17 the drop dead date, do you think, for a Big Ten start, with the idea of being in the consideration for the college football playoff? Because I did the math, and there are 10 weeks from October 17, 10 Saturdays from October 17 through December the 12th. Then you could play the Big Ten championship game on the 19th. That would allow you to probably get at least 8 games in, I think, in the regular season, with 2-week buffer built in, and then play on the 19th. Because as we know, the college football playoff announced a couple of weeks ago, it's not going to have its final rankings until December the 20th. Of course, everything can change, but is October 17 the drop dead date? What's your take?
It'd probably have to be around there. And you mentioned the Alamo earlier. That's probably the Alamo for the Big Ten, in terms of, once that date passes, it's going to be tough for you to get in that college football playoff race. You mentioned game week as well. Something to be said there is, we just had games this weekend, and it didn't feel like a college football weekend. I don't even think it's going to – no, and it's not going to feel like a college football weekend this weekend. There's not a matchup between ranked teams until October. The way we've kind of approached it here at Sporting News, even with my editors, is they're kind of pointing at September 26th as the first actual weekend of football, because that's when the SEC fires up. So
yeah,
if you believe in that, and I kind of subscribe to that too, then the Big Ten does have some time. But once you get past, I always targeted October 3rd. I thought that was the right date, because then you had a little more flexibility with the schedule. If they want to go the 10th, that's fine. If you don't go by the 17th, then you're going to be looking at this Thanksgiving plan, which I get the allure of it. I get the TV window. I get all that stuff. But I'm telling you, Tim, it will feel like a consolation season if that's what they do.
Yeah.
Because it won't be on the college football playoff race.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with somebody from the Pac-12, over the weekend, and that's what they were still targeting. They think that's a doable thing, around Thanksgiving. And I didn't get in a big argument with this person, because I was just trying to get a feel for what they were thinking. And, they were pretty fired up that the Pac-12 was trying to get into cahoots with the Big Ten. But this person was also just stupefied that the Pac-12 seems to be getting its act together, and the Big Ten seems to be acting like a grenade,
Right.
And that's what it looks like from the outside. I don't know if these Big Ten officials and Kevin Warren and these Big Ten presidents understand what the perception is out there, but it's almost like the Big Ten is kind of snubbing its nose and sort of acting elite, which, it has some right to feel elite, but that it knows best. Well, nobody really knows in this time frame, one way or the other. And, it is their duty and their job to make a decision. So, it is up to them, and you can argue with it, but it is their decision. But this idea that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are going to create some kind of like postseason hootenanny that's going to satisfy the masses, after starting their season after Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving, I don't know. I don't really buy it because that's about when the NFL is really getting into its playoffs. Be getting into its playoffs if things go according to plan with the NFL, and I'm not sure what they're shooting for there.
Well, think about this. If they start on Thanksgiving weekend, that Friday, Notre Dame plays at North Carolina.
Yeah.
Or that game's probably going to the ACC championship. The next day is the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to watch a Big Ten opener over the Iron Bowl outside of here. I mean, that Iron Bowl will probably have some impact on the college football playoff race. Those things are definitely real. And, one of the things you mentioned about the Big Ten that's real striking to me, sometimes I wonder what the Ohio State coverage would be like if Urban Meyer was still coach and what that relationship would be with the school president. Because clearly there's some contentiousness with Jim Harbaugh and Michigan's president. Penn State, not as bad. I mean, Nebraska seems to be in line, but that Michigan one strikes me a little bit because when you see Jim Harbaugh saying over the weekend, we could play in 2 weeks, and then you're reading the reports about the school president there and that they haven't spoken. They've texted a little bit, so everything's going through Ward. I have no doubt Jim Harbaugh wants to play. I mean, Ohio State may have beat them X amount of times in a row. It's 8 now. They could be 9 or 10, 11. Jim Harbaugh's still going to want to play. And I think that's something, the relationship between the Big Ten commissioner and coaches and athletic directors is going to be strained. Coaches and presidents is going to be strained. And as you know, from being around this conference forever, more often than not, the football coach wins.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about Jim Harbaugh, the way you just described a while ago, about he wants to play, he definitely wants to play Ohio State. It reminds me of that Kevin Bacon character in what was the movie? I'm losing the movie, but thank you, sir. May I have another?
Animal House, of course.
Animal House, yeah.
You're better than
I don't know why that went over my head, but I remember the scene distinctly. But yeah, you're right. I think Ryan Day, Gene Smith, and Christina Johnson, the athletic director and president at Ohio State, are on the same page. But they're on the same page, but they're not being allowed to read their book. It's Ryan Day, when he broke down the team on Saturday after the little workout, I understand he told the team, he hopes to hear really good news, really, pretty soon. And so you're still kind of dangling that carrot out there for these guys to keep working hard. But what does soon mean? I think we're going to find out. Let me ask you this, Bill. Just from a national standpoint, what do you think the college football playoff would look like without Big Ten and Pac-12 participation? And I know what you're going to say. The smart aleck answer is to say just like it did in 2016 and 17.
Well, it may very well be those same teams too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you look at Clemson and what they've done, and being 43-2, including conference championship games the last 5 years in the ACC, a run of dominance in the conference that reminds me a lot of Florida State in the 90s. And that's another layer to Ohio State is, the people, and I get that question a lot of, what's the mood in Columbus and all that. Before COVID, the mood in Columbus was that Ohio State fans felt like they had a team that should have beat Clemson. And now they have a team capable of beating Clemson and probably not going to get a swing at Clemson.
Yeah.
Unless something happened. And I think Clemson's probably, Clemson and two most talented teams in the country that are still playing. And I would have put Ohio State in that weight class. Then it gets interesting. Oklahoma's probably the best team in the Big 12 as usual, but a new quarterback. And, that could go either way. With Lincoln Riley, it tends to go the right way.
Yeah.
And that leaves that second SEC team or the American Athletic Conference champion. So I think that second SEC team, it's 2 weeks ago, I say Georgia, but then their quarterback opts out.
Yeah.
LSU's lost everybody. It could be a Florida opportunity there with Kyle Trask coming back. But that again, you're going to take an SEC runner-up as that fourth playoff team. If the Big Ten gets in the season, to me, the biggest allure of that is Ohio State's probably not – I didn't see a loss on their schedule. I mean, you have to play it out. I understand that. Ohio State makes the perfect fourth playoff team. You go Ohio State, Oklahoma, Clemson, Alabama. I know that's same old, but it's pretty good.
Hey, blue blood, man. When they had the jousting back in the old days, in jolly old England, you just wanted the best Knights out there going at it, right? And I agree. That's what, before we move into another area, that's what I want to talk on about. I mean, you've been around. You say I've been around a long time. You've been around a long time too, just not as long as me. But this is as talented an Ohio State football team from top to bottom. I'm talking about pure roster as I've ever covered. This is that moment in time that you won't get back from the standpoint of a great team. You might get another one down the road, but you've got a quarterback who you figure is leaving after this season. You've got some talented guys on the defense who are going to be leaving after this season. You've got an offensive line that's uh, could be right up there with one of the great offensive lines in Ohio State history from like the mid '70s and even the last several years. I mean, with Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis and Thayer Munford et al., as I like to say, it's like a five-star chock full line there. That's why you want to see this team have a shot one way or the other, or at least be given the chance to start a shot. Agreed?
I mean, to me, there's, as you were saying, that there's 4 Ohio State teams that really stand out to me, at least in my lifetime, that you thought that's the what if team. And it's 98 losing to Saban. That team was loaded. The couple before that lost to Michigan, obviously, in 94,
95, yeah.
Those teams were in that class. And then in the more modern, I guess, playoff era and BCS era, the Urban Meyer's first team that didn't get a chance to play, they go 12-0. I don't think they're better than this team.
No.
The 15 team would be an interesting debate. The one that lost to Michigan State on a last-second field goal. Now, if you want to put 15 versus this team, that's fine, but 15 played it out on the field. 05 played it out on the field against Texas and lost by a fingernail catch to Lima Swede. What's going to sting here is you had the only returning Heisman finalist. You had that big line. Some of those guys, a couple of those guys could have left the NFL, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
The receiving talent, I love watching receivers as a high school has been at the position that, Ohio State had plenty of that. And then the defense was going to be really good around Sean Wade and some other guys. So, yeah, I mean, this was a team to me built to compete with Clemson again, built to compete with Alabama's loaded again. I think Alabama's kind of the one. I'm watching them, and I think they're going to be angry with how last year went. But, yeah, we could have watched that semifinal, and not getting to do that's borderline criminal in some ways. I mean, and there's lawsuits and things going on to prove that.
But for example, we were talking about the SEC's all fired up, ready to go, ACC, whatever. And then we look where the, Georgia quarterback kid who transferred in from Wake Forest opted out of the season. And, do you think that happened because he saw the handwriting on the wall that maybe he wasn't going to be the guy, or just what's your take on that? And just when you think you've got it lined up, I think LSU's had a couple of kids walk away also because of the COVID-19 situation, or the idea of the specter of maybe getting it. Ohio State hasn't had that yet, but it kind of puts that other spin on this thing that everybody's chomping at the bit to play, but maybe they aren't.
Right. I mean, Jamar Chase last week, the LSU receiver that won the Blitnikoff Award, had a monster season with Joe Burrow last year. He opts out. Jamie Newman at Georgia. You saw that with the Big Ten before they canceled. Guys like Parsons, Bateman, Rondale Moore all opted out. But I was telling people at the time, with the exception of Parsons, those guys were on teams that weren't going to win the Big Ten anyway. So, I mean, Parsons and Jamar Chase, those register. Those are 2 of the top 10 players in the country. You just never know. I think that's part of this season. The analogy I keep using is it's kind of like a demolition derby in some ways. That you normally have to deal with injuries as it is, but now you're dealing with a virus that could wipe out a quarterback room at any given time.
Yes.
You're dealing with administrations, conferences, all kinds of things that are outside the realm of football, which makes it hard to enjoy the actual product on the field. At least for me last weekend, I'm watching a little bit of Army and Middle Tennessee State, and I'm probably going to watch BYU Navy and all that kind of stuff. But there is a certain level, and I hate to be over dramatic, Tim, but there is a level of emptiness knowing that the MAC's not playing, or Ohio State's not playing, or none of the D3 schools that I have friends and parents of friends that have boys that play on Division III schools all over the place in Ohio. And then we're watching high school the next night, and I'm like, this just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, let's jump right into that because we were talking before we started here. You live in Pickerington. You're a national correspondent, but people have to live places, right? You live in Pickerington, and Jack Sawyer's right down the road from you. I think you could run to Jack Sawyer's house. You bragged earlier, uh, but and of course he's opted out of the season. He was looking forward to getting to play in the spring if the you know quotes around spring. If in fact the Big Ten kicked it to there, but of course you saw the recommendation this past week by the in essence the rules committee for want of another term that would deny young men coming in January the right to play in the spring. We'll see where that goes, but high school football is ensuing. I mean, how do we explain this to youngsters when they want to know about this 30 years from now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Spencer, when we were talking before you were late to this podcast, of course, being not punctual. No, I'm kidding.
It's a long way from my upstairs to my downstairs.
Yeah, no, Spencer was talking about going down to Ironton, and the experience of watching a game there. And I was telling him, when I was in high school, I watched them play DeSales at Fulton Field in Lancaster, and I think there was people like hanging off the fences. That's how much high school means here. I mean, obviously living in Pickerington, you have a bunch of potential Ohio State players. Jack Sawyer's one. There's a younger Styles that's Lorenzo's younger brother. There's talent all over the place. I guess that's the thing for me is, we watched Pickerington North and Pickerington Central on ESPN last Sunday. We had a flag football combine in Pickerington where Pickerington Central players were helping, and you get to they have a bunch of good kids. I mean, Max LaMonica is not a name most people know. He's probably going to be playing Division I. So, and then I follow that as much as I follow college in some ways. Like I saw Akron Hoban had a big weekend. If there's any Hoban listeners out there, and it is who we are in Ohio. That's what I always tell people. This football is who we are, and no program or team, I would even say over the Browns and Bengals, nobody's more universal than Ohio State in this state. And not having them, and then watching the Bearcats be able to play with a former Ohio State coach, again, that's another layer that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't. It's hard to compute it. It's like I was down in Texas a couple of weeks ago. Went down for the delayed memorial service for my mom who passed away back in June, and the smaller schools there were getting to start football that weekend, and then but they delayed the start for the larger high schools. Like where I'm from, Lufkin's a class 6A again. They've been going back and forth from 5A to 6A, but the larger schools were delayed, I think, until the end of this month or the beginning of next month. But they pushed everything back, and they're on track to play. And but then you come back and like the league, I think the league that's best equipped of all the leagues, I'm talking about the Power 5 conferences, that's best equipped to deal with COVID-19 and its challenges, because there are so many of these Big Ten schools that have major medical centers either attached to them or right next door, and have the wherewithal from a money standpoint. Although you're seeing, obviously you're seeing budget cutting, budget slashing across the board right now at many Big Ten schools. We saw the missive from Michigan last week about the cuts that were being made. But the conference that seems most equipped to handle it than any of them is opting out. And so, it does make you sit back and wonder, Bill, is the Big Ten doing the right thing? With, like you said, the TCU, SMU suddenly having to cancel their game. Like I pointed out, and you just said it a while ago, but I pointed out weeks ago, COVID-19, you can handle 4 or 5 guys getting it on your team unless it's your quarterback room,
Right.
So you can't play a game that week, or will you be forced to play a game that week, even though, the numbers say you've got all these other healthy guys. I mean, like I've said all along, until a vaccine comes along that works, we're going to be sitting here wondering about this from week to week, right?
Well, they're playing with fire no matter what. I mean, I one thing that is going on that I don't know that I would have fans in the stands. think that's worked out for MLB and the bubbles in the NBA and the NHL. I would say that's probably contributed to some success, is not having fans in the stands. I don't know that I would have 10% or 15%. I know that hurts with all the pageantry and stuff, but you're playing with it if you do that. Like you said about the university hospitals, I think the Big Ten, I did this stat earlier, that 4 or 5 of the best university hospitals in the country are in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
At least 4 or 5. And so, yeah, they do have the capability to do that. In January, there's going to be some I told you, whether it comes from the Big Ten and the Pac-12 or the SEC, the Big Ten, or Big 12 and ACC. And the loser of that, I told you so, which is a phrase I hate using those in our house, but somebody's going to feel that. And that's the question. So, again, that's an interesting question. Like, we don't know if the Big Ten's wrong. It feels wrong. I think, again, it feels wrong because of the timing, and it feels wrong because had all 5 conferences canceled or proceeded at the same time, which is what they should have done, then this would feel a little bit different. But that's college football for you. You have 5 families, and they can't agree to do the same thing.
Bill, I've had people pretend that out of this will come a major agglomeration. That's not even a real word, but you know where I'm going with that, of the major schools who will now work in accord and take care of themselves in these kind of situations. And I'm going, if there was ever a situation to where the major Power 5 conference commissioners and leaders should have gotten together, it was 5 months ago.
Right.
To think it's going to come out of this hand grenade, I think is ridiculous, because this is all about, as Urban Meyer put it, several weeks ago on this podcast, this is all about survival of the fittest, and that's what it's looking like. And I see the opposite in being the offshoot of this. But isn't it bizarre that we're sitting here in this day and age, and there is no one person or a group of people saying, okay, Power 5, we're sitting this out until November. We're all sitting it out. It's glaring, isn't it? The lack of cohesion and leadership from the NCAA, because it really doesn't have leadership over the Power 5 when it comes to football in this moment.
The college football does need a commitment. I'll preface that by saying I don't know if it would have made a difference for this season in terms. You could have had let's take Urban Meyer, for example. Let's say Urban Meyer's the college football commissioner, because I think it needs to be somebody with that kind of power and voice, whether it's Urban Meyer or Nick Saban when he retires, or a Mac Brown, whatever. Has to be that kind of influential voice on the sport. And they would have said, that's fine. They could have organized people and all of that, and that would have been helpful. But at the same time, everybody would have been mad at that college football commissioner the second he says, I mean, that's just, that's how that's going to work. So I think there is a need for that down the line. But to your point, and I don't want to burst some people's bubbles here, but people in Oxford, Mississippi don't care about Ohio State football that they're not playing. People in Tuscaloosa don't care. That
Wait a minute, you see the billboards, the little sign on the side of the road in Mississippi the other day, taking a dig at the Big Ten, but go ahead now.
I mean, I don't think they care, though. They're not going to feel bad for you.
Right, exactly.
Tuscaloosa, they might care a little bit just because that means Ohio State's out of the way. But there's no sympathy from SEC country, and there's no sympathy from the ACC or the Big 12 because they're not working together.
Yeah.
Nobody shed a tear when the Pac-12 canceled because it was one less conference in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. Yeah, how many Power 5 schools are there? There's, if you include Notre Dame, I think it's like 65 or 66 programs that could consider themselves the big boys. Notre Dame doesn't care that Ohio State's not playing. They get the Midwest to themselves for a year. So, unless you count Pitt. But, that's the thing. Like, the self-interest of the conference, it's like 5 different, I date myself, but like city-states almost in ancient Greece. They don't care about each other. They care about themselves.
Yeah.
And they make a ton of money for themselves. And that's what the college game is. And I don't know, like you said, if this doesn't change that, then don't expect it to change in 2021 or 2022.
No. No, this is going to be more of like the 2021 is going to be bragging we played and you didn't, or we didn't play and look how stupid you were to play. That's like you said, I told you so. That's what 2021 is going to be. Hey, one last thought before we get out of here, because I know you've got all kinds of like responsibilities on a day like today, but as we record this on a Monday morning, but what is your what is your sense of the impact, immediate impact? This is going to come from left field for you. The immediate impact that Jack Sawyer could have made in the spring, if in fact he was or perhaps could be allowed to play. Is he the kind of, you've watched him play on the hoof? Is he the kind of kid that could come in and make an immediate impact at Ohio State?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know if you're expecting like Chase Young as a junior impact. No,
No, I don't
but
mean that.
He could come in and contribute. Yes, I think once Jack, remember, this is a kid that last year their starting quarterback tore his ACL, and Jack Sawyer had never played quarterback in his life, stepped in, played quarterback, and led him to a couple wins. I mean, that's the type of talented athlete he is. I think he's smart. You mentioned his decision to opt out. You know, some people might criticize that. I wouldn't. I think he made the right decision for his future. He's a really bright kid. Ohio State fans are going to love watching him play.
Oh, yeah.
And once he gets with Larry Johnson, he'll follow down that line of the Bozas and then Chase Young, and he'll be that next guy, Zach Harrison, as he continues to develop, and he'll get off that edge and do that. And I think, but if he played in the spring, to answer your question, if they did a spring football, I think he would be at minimum a rotational player right away. And then once they get him in the weight room and do the things that Mickey Marotti does, you're going to see that. But he reminds me a little bit. I don't. It's hard to compare him to either Boza or Chase Young. I think he's just a little bit different than those three. He's got the explosiveness. And that's fine because Larry will find a way to. If anybody's going to do a good job with him, it's going to be Larry.
I was going to say, Greg Madison also likes it. I mean, right on down the road, and but you're right. I had Jack Sawyer on my podcast here a couple of weeks ago, and the other thing that stood out to me about him is that he's already looking forward to that name, image, and likeness loophole that's coming. I mean, he's already playing. Like I tell everybody, Bill, there's a different breed. There's a different breed of athlete coming up through the ranks, even as we speak. Right? It's going to be a totally different playing field, so to speak, for them compared to 10 years ago.
Well, and the athlete has changed too, and I'm getting a little bit of a whiff of that with a 9-year-old son that definitely is coming up, doing the flag football thing, and you see the level of talent at Pickerington. When I was a kid, it was, hey, let's go throw the ball around a little bit. With him, it's, if we're in the backyard now, we're doing route trees and learning how to stock block, and he's 9 years old. But the IQ is off the charts for high school kids now is what I'm trying to say. By then, they're so ready. And, I mean, this is one town in Ohio. So, but I think long story short, Jack's going to have a really good career at Ohio State because he's just come with good parents, good programs here, and he's willing to listen despite his talent. It's always weird when you interview a kid when he's 15 and you leave the interview thinking, well, that kid's going to play in the NFL. But that's the reality of the situation now.
It is. Hey, real quick, what have you got coming down the road this week that people can tune in to sportingnews.com and check you out?
Well, you need that Clemson-Wake Forest breakdown, I'm sure. I mean, the schedule Saturday is not great. We'll do picks, and we'll get ready for week 2 and get in kind of my rhythm that I get into during the season. But, again, there's that just big hole when 54 teams aren't playing.
Yeah, but what's interesting?
It makes it hard to,
This is the kind of moment, though, where you could see an upset. I mean, you could see upsets pop up. I mean, what kind of camp did these teams have, et cetera? We know Wake Forest has got a decent little program. I mean, I'm not going to put it, obviously, on the Clemson level, but yeah, I mean, I think the next several weeks, you could see some interesting results because of this big delay, this anticipation, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this is going to be an interesting year no matter what. Agreed?
Yeah, and it really is going to be, you always say this will be a 30 for 30 about this season. Well, a couple things I would say. One, it's going to be interesting because everybody's going to ask, should there be an asterisk next to it? Me personally, I don't think that's the case. Is there going to be a spring national champion? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going to have a split national champion, which that's not all that far in the past that LSU and USC split a national title. But it's going to And maybe on top of it, what if Notre Dame wins the ACC? What if Alabama loses 3 games somehow? And that would contribute to that kind of what we're dealing with here. What if the Big Ten makes a last-minute call to come in October and Ohio State wins the whole thing? That would be the whole what we're talking about here. So there's a long way to go, and the story changes every day. Truly, Tim, sometimes games are scheduled into 2030. We're having games being scheduled and canceled next week. That's where we're at.
Exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as always, it is great to have Bill Bender on with me. And Bill and I have become pretty good friends. And as you know, as you've noticed, he knows the national scene as well as anybody out there, maybe better. But Bill, until next time, man, I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
All right, yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on the Tim May Podcast.